Warrant Officer First Class Decker had been assigned to run the projector. That was the whole of his job that morning. Load the slides, advance them on the colonel's nod, and stay invisible. He was the youngest person in Conference Room 4 at Fort Ashburn by a good 8 years, and the lowest ranked by a margin that felt like a canyon. 19 engineers sat around the long table. Colonels, majors, 3 civilian PhDs from the Allied Defense Consortium, and a 2-star general named Hargrove, who had said nothing since he took his seat in the back corner and folded his hands. Decker had read the agenda. Today's item was the Meridian Targeting Solution, a long-range ballistics problem that had stalled the Army's precision program for the better part of 18 months. 3 contractors had taken a run at it. 2 university teams had submitted models. All of them had come close enough to be disappointing. The last entry on the agenda was listed simply as Lement Calloway, Independent Derivation. Decker had not known what to make of that until she walked in. First Lieutenant Mara Calloway was the only officer in the room below the rank of Major. She looked it. She was young, mid-20s, dark hair pulled back, a single row of ribbons above her left pocket that Decker had not yet learned to read. She set a green logbook on the table in front of her, sat down at the far end from the general, and did not speak to anyone. She did not appear nervous. She appeared, if anything, slightly bored. A person looks when they have already finished something and are waiting for everyone else to catch up. Colonel Voss ran the session. He was a trim man in his late 50s, methodical, with the bearing of someone who had spent decades presiding over rooms exactly like this one. He worked through the agenda efficiently. The contractor models, their margins of error, the unresolved drift calculations in the Meridian profile. He was fair and thorough. He gave each submission its honest accounting. Then he reached the last item. He picked up Calloway's logbook with 2 fingers, the way a man picks up something left behind in a classroom, passed it to the engineer on his left. The engineer opened it, turned a few pages, and passed it along. Decker watched it travel around the table. Some of the men studied it seriously. Most glanced at a page or 2 and moved it on. One of the civilian PhDs smiled at something, not unkindly, but with the patient tolerance of a man who has seen promising student work before. Colonel Voss waited until the logbook completed its circuit and came to rest at the center of the table. Then he looked at Calloway and spoke. "Lieutenant Calloway's figures show real effort," he said. "The drift compensation in particular is intuitive work. Core solution is speculative. These derivations aren't grounded in confirmed test data. At best, they represent an educated guess." The room accepted this. No one argued. A few men wrote something in their notes. Calloway looked at the colonel without expression and said nothing. Decker advanced the slide. He did not know why he looked at the general in that moment. Hargrove had not moved. He was still in his back corner seat, still with his hands folded, but his eyes had gone to the logbook on the table. Not to Calloway, to the logbook. He studied it for a long moment. Then he spoke. The first words he had said all morning. "Colonel, before we close the item, what derivation method is she using on page 41? Voss glanced at the logbook, then at Calloway. "Lieutenant?" Calloway's answer was quiet and without ceremony. She named the method in 4 words. A shorthand Decker didn't recognize, something from the field of exterior ballistics. Several of the engineers straightened almost imperceptibly. Hargrove nodded once. "Pull up the archive," he said to Decker. "Test range database. Filter for program designator Crestline." Decker's fingers found the keyboard. He did not know what Crestline was. He typed it in. The system asked for authorization. Hargrove spoke 2 numbers from the back of the room, a clearance code, recited without looking up, and Decker entered them and hit return. The loading bar moved slowly. In the silence, someone's pen clicked twice and stopped. Then the file opened. The header read, "Crestline, Long-Range Ballistics Accuracy Trial Classification, Secret Lead Analyst, M1LT, Record Period, 14 months. Decker scrolled because the general told him to scroll. He did not fully understand what he was reading, but he understood enough. Predicted impact coordinates, down to a grid square, for 7 separate test rounds. Crosswind corrections at 3 altitude bands. Coriolis compensation at ranges above 2,000 meters. A drift formula that filled most of 1 page. Display the confirmation column, Grove said. Decker found it. He put it on the screen. The confirmation column showed the actual recorded impacts of all 7 rounds, fired on a live test range over 14 months, in varying conditions, at distances the Meridian program had never been able to reliably solve. Next to each impact was the predicted coordinate from Callaway's filed solution. Decker was not a ballistics engineer. He was a warrant officer who ran projectors. But he could read numbers, and the numbers were not close. They were the same, round after round. Predicted impact and actual impact within 3 meters, 7 for 7. No one spoke. Hargrove rose from his chair. He was a deliberate man, not theatrical, not given to gestures. And when he moved, it was with the measured weight of someone who chooses his moments. He walked to the front of the room and stood beside the screen and looked at the table. Tenant Callaway filed this solution 14 months ago, he said. It has been sitting in a sealed program archive because no one in the chain thought to cross-reference an independent derivation from a first lieutenant against a contractor problem. He said this without inflection, as a fact, not an accusation. Then he looked at Callaway. This is your method. These are your numbers. Yes, sir, she said. The same method you used on page 41 of your logbook. Yes, sir. Hargrove turned back to the table. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Gentlemen, he said, this program has been stalled for 18 months because we handed the Meridian problem to teams with more credentials and missed the woman who had already solved it. The silence in the room had changed. It was no longer the comfortable silence of a session wrapping up. It had weight now, a reckoning quality, the kind that settles over a room when something true has been said that cannot be unsaid. Colonel Voss had not moved. He was looking at the screen. His hand rested on the logbook. Decker watched him. He watched the moment the colonel understood, not that he had been wrong, exactly, the full shape of how wrong and how long and at whose expense. Voss set the logbook down with care. He did not look at Callaway again, not then. Hargrove moved first. He turned to face Callaway and stood straight, and the 2-star on his collar caught the light. He said her call sign once. Crestline, the way you say a name you have known a long time, and he held her gaze, and he nodded. Then the engineer on Hargrove's left stood up. Then another, and another. Around the table, one by one, without a word being said, the colonels, the majors, the civilian PhDs, they rose. Not a salute, not a ceremony, not a scripted moment of protocol. Just men rising, because there was nothing else the room could do. 19 of them, standing in the quiet. Callaway did not smile. She did not look around the table to count them. She looked at the screen, her numbers, her record, for a moment, with the composed, inward expression of someone revisiting something they built alone in a room that no one else ever entered. Then she picked up her logbook, settled it under her arm, and looked at Hargrove. Will the program need my derivation notes, sir? Yes, Lieutenant, Hargrove said. All of them. She nodded once and sat back down. Decker did not write any of this in his notes. He was supposed to be invisible. He turned off the projector and stared at the blank wall where the numbers had been. The 7 rounds, the 3-meter margin, 18 months of work that a room full of experts had circled the table past without reading. He was 23 years old. He had been in the Army for 2 years. He thought he knew, more or less, what that service asked of a person. The discipline, the rank, credentialed path from here to something better here. He was not sure he had understood, until that morning, looked like when a person simply did the work, the real work, the hard and solitary and unrewarded kind, and then sat down at the far end of the table and waited for the room to arrive.